listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome to another great edition of the GM Shuffle podcast, presented to you by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Marc Malusis in for Jeff Schwartz on this Monday edition. Of course, the great Marty Hurney joins us, as he does each and every week and each and every podcast with Jeff, and longtime GM with the Carolina Panthers, obviously Washington Commanders as well. What's going on, Marty? How are you post NFL scouting combine in Indy?
Doing great, Mark. I think I feel a lot better than I did in previous years when I was up there, and that week can be a grind, with the interviews and the workouts and talking to agents and everything you have to do. I mean, you come out of Indy last night or this morning, and you're exhausted, and now all you have to do is get back and get your free agent board finalized and get ready to hit free agency March 11th, and then get ready and go to as many pro days as you can. And so it never stops. But that is a very important week in Indy for a lot of reasons. And now you just keep going. You don't stop. You get back home, and the scouts go on the road to pro days, and the pro scouts and the coaches and the executives get in the room and finalize the free agent board.
Yeah, and from interviews and obviously what you saw on the field and the workouts and the measurements, in terms of adding all that information into the draft process, in terms of your rating board and your overall big board when looking forward to moving here. Before we get into kind of post-scouting combine, Marty, let's get into some NFL news here. Report out of, according to Adam Schefter, the Chiefs have informed offensive tackle Jawaan Taylor that he will be released before the start of the new league year, which is March the 11th. Barring a trade, Taylor's release will save Kansas City about $20 million under the cap. They've reportedly already restructured the contract to Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, Kansas City missed the playoffs this year. Offensive line, though, and Taylor hasn't exactly been a solution. He's been called for a number of false starts over the past number of years. But what about this offensive line now for Kansas City, and what about the news in terms of Taylor being out for Andy Reid and the Chiefs?
Yeah, I just think that, this is what the Chiefs are going to do, right? They're a very good front office, and that they have gotten together with Andy Reid and have really pinpointed the spots that they just weren't good enough. And Taylor just made too many mistakes as far as jumping off sides or lining up where his belt line didn't cross the centers or whatever that is. But he was not the player. When he came out, we really thought, the question was, could he play left tackle? His best spot really was right tackle. And he was a really good player coming out, but he just, I think this is what the Chiefs are doing. They're saying, listen, we're going to make the moves that we need to make to get back to the championship level. And you can't play at a championship level if you make that many mistakes on that side on the line, as far as, offsides or early start penalties.
Yeah, lining up improperly. How about in Cincinnati, Marty? Dalton Risner, a one-year extension worth about $5 million, according to reports, with his agent, Drew Rosenhaus and company. What about the Bengals getting one of their interior offensive linemen back under the fold? They're getting that extension done.
Yeah, I think that's very important, obviously. I mean, they have to protect Joe Burrow, and they've had some issues there. And he's a journeyman guard, so it's not. I think continuity will help them there, especially on the offensive line. I think having the same guys work together as much as you can really helps you, because it's how those five guys play together that indicates what kind of offensive line you have. But I think it's a good move, and it seems like a reasonable contract, so it's a good start. But they have a lot of work to do.
Change in Minnesota. Obviously, we know that their general manager was let go a couple of weeks back, but two players, Aaron Jones, defensive tackle Javon Hargrave, have been informed that if their trade's not worked out, they'll be released at the start of the new league year to save a little bit of money under the salary cap. It is a salary cap world in the National Football League. The Vikings went all in on this past season, Marty, and obviously didn't get the quarterback play they needed in order to be successful. But what's your take on both Hargrave and Jones?
Well, and I think they're clearing money out. I think they know they need a veteran quarterback, right, Mark? So I kind of have Kirk Cousins penciled into there, and I don't know what kind of money he will make there. We were kind of laughing before we came on. I mean, Kirk Cousins could be the subject of a 101 negotiating class for college students who want to get into sports, because he has been at the right place at the right time every spot of his career. He's made a lot of money being franchised and or moving, and right now he's in a great spot because there are several teams that need quarterbacks, and the demand is much higher than the supply. So I think that wherever he ends up, Kirk Cousins is going to find himself starting again. And I think that with Kevin O'Connell, it seems like the Vikings are the perfect spot for him. And because of that, I think they probably are trying to clear out as much cap money as they can.
Marty, let's stay along, let's stay along that thought process and talk about the quarterbacks. And we'll mix in a little bit of a conversation looking at what we learned this past weekend out in Indianapolis. And obviously, free agency not all that far away, and teams looking either for short-term, immediate impact or starters right away when you're looking at this free agency class and you're looking at the quarterback situation. Let's look back on some of these college prospects. Fernando Mendoza, clear, obviously, the belief is he's going to go number 1 overall to the Vegas Raiders. What about, is there any concern about his hand measurement sitting there at 9.5?
Yeah, it's funny because you would love for his hand size to be 10. And that's the thing that that's the key about how you handle a combine, Mark, is how do you handle all this minutia, right? All the little details. Some are very important and some aren't in the big picture. And with Fernando Mendoza, I think for one thing, this is the first time I can think. I mean, even Peyton Manning had Ryan Leaf coming in interviews behind him, and people were saying, "Oh, who's going to go number 1, Ryan Leaf or Peyton Manning?" I mean, we knew it was going to be Peyton Manning, and David Carr, the Houston Texans as an expansion team. Shoot, they said in February they were going to take him number 1 overall. But most of the time, there's more quarterbacks to compare. So because there's not, I think we focus on Fernando Mendoza, but everything went perfectly, I think, for him at the combine. Reports were that he interviewed very well, and he's supposed to be a very smart player that can win from the neck up. So that's not a question at all. Obviously, he's going to do everything at his school, but with he's got all the elite measurables, 6'4", 3/4, 236. The hand size is 9.5. It does not affect him. Okay. But it's just something that, you look at Diego Pavia at 5'10", and he's got hands of 9 and 5/8. So they are not, they would be described as not ideal sized hands for Fernando, but it is nothing that will affect him. So it's just something you bring up because there's you got to search for negatives for this guy. And that's what you do when you got the number 1 pick. Listen, when we pick Cam Newton, I mean, that's your career, right? You either, if you don't hit on that, then you're basically gone. I mean, since then there's been a couple examples of people missing on high first round picks and still recuperating, but that's not usually the case. So this is a huge pick for them, and Fernando Mendoza has sort of been the anointed one for good reason, because he played like the best quarterback and the best player in the league, but you want to make sure you're not missing anything. But he really did. He had a clean combine and clean medical, it seemed like, in measurables. So he's going to be a first player taken.
And Marty, you hit upon it when we were talking about guys that you were interested in watching this past weekend out in Indianapolis. Taylen Green, the quarterback out of Arkansas, was a player that you were intrigued by. 6'6", big, athletic, a little bit raw, but he put on an absolute show for NFL teams this weekend.
Yeah, he really did. And, just like every time you see a quarterback that's a really good athlete that might be raw in other areas, everybody's talking about, that they're going to ask him to play another position, running back, receiver. No, I don't agree with that. I think this kid is a good quarterback. He's raw, but how many times? 6'5" and 7/8, 227 pounds, 4.36 40. And Mark, really maybe even more impressive, a 43.5 vertical and 11 and 2 broad jump. And basically those vertical and broad jumps come into play where if you get anything over 40 in the vertical, anything over 10 really in the broad, but especially 11, what it does is that shows you the explosion that player has, the quickness, the just the ability to get off the ball, and those are very big indicators of a player's explosion. So a guy like Taylor Green, I mean, to me, heck, you can't bring him in, and even if he's third quarterback until he develops, you can't bring him in and put packages in for him, and because he can run, he can throw. I mean, I kind of have him in the mind of what Malik Willis was coming out. Obviously, different measurables, different players, but Malik had been a running back and needed experience at the position, and I think so does Taylen Green. I mean, I think he's going to have to take 2-3 years to grow into it. But while he does that, I think he's an athlete that you can put in certain packages at quarterback that will make you dangerous. So he was a very intriguing guy to me going in, and he basically affirmed what I thought. Now, does he have to get more consistent with his accuracy? Yes, that's what they said about Cam Newton. But if you watch, he does show the ability to drop the ball into small targets and in close quarters. So he also has some balls that are off target. So he will take time. But I thought he was very impressive. And at the very least, he's got teams running back and saying, let's look at watch this guy more quarterback.
Marty, quickly here, how difficult, though, is it for a team in the National Football League to draft a player and then take 2 to 3 years to develop that player?
Well, it depends on your situation, but Mark, at this point, that's what a lot of teams in the league are going to have to try to do, because there's not enough quarterbacks to go around right now.
No.
We're trying to get to 27 where there's a good draft class, but right now, I mean, there's probably only one starter in this draft class, right? At least immediate. And I think that's the way to go, where you don't reach for a quarterback to start if he's not ready. But if you can get a guy to develop, I think you always do that.
We'll talk about Ty Simpson. We'll talk about the free agency quarterback class as well. Continue that conversation. Marc Malusis and Marty Hurney with you. It's the GM Shuffle, brought to you, of course, by the DraftKings Network.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome back to the GM Shuffle. Marc Malusis, Marty Hurney with you as we're doing a little post-NFL scouting combine out at Indianapolis breakdown. And Marty, we're talking wrapping up segment number one. We were talking about quarterbacks and talked a little bit about Fernando Mendoza and obviously Taylen Green, the quarterback out of Arkansas, who showed off his athletic ability. What's your take on Ty Simpson? Met with the media, meeting with, Aaron Glenn and Frank Reich and the New York Jets, and Jets have 2 first-round draft choices on the upcoming NFL draft. People point to his production early on in Alabama, and then the back injury late in the season for the Crimson Tide. What's your take on where Ty Simpson falls in terms of being a true, legit franchise-caliber quarterback?
I think right now you're looking to see that if he's a win-with quarterback as far as being, a lower level starter, he's definitely a high level backup for sure. Okay. He's a good player. I do worry a little bit from what I've seen so far about his vision and being able to see everything, see the field. But he's a very smart. He'll win games for you from the neck up. He knows where to go with the ball when he sees it. He's got adequate arm strength. I would not put him as a first round quarterback to me. I think that you'd be better off taking a better player and then seeing what happens maybe in the second round and as you go further. But he's a very steady, competent quarterback that has, I would say, average starting skills.
Marty, how difficult is it for teams that where you have a glaring need at the quarterback position. As for argument's sake, say the New York Jets, right? They need to find themselves a quarterback for 2026, and they need to find themselves a quarterback of the future as well to go out there and develop. And then you look at the free agency list. We already talked about Kirk Cousins potentially landing in Minnesota, right? A lot of people believe Malik Willis ends up in Miami, but you've got Daniel Jones in that situation to continue to follow him, whether or not they franchise tag him by the March 3rd deadline out there in Indianapolis. You've got the potential of Kyler Murray out there in Arizona. That relationship seems to be frayed. But this list, we've been waiting on a decision from Aaron Rodgers. It's not an overwhelming list of solutions when you're looking at free agency in the quarterback room.
There's not. There really isn't. And your initial question is what happens? How do you approach it if you have a need and you're high as far as taking a player? I think history has proven that if you reach for a position, especially quarterback, that the results normally aren't good. I think that you can't force, and that's one of the biggest things you learn as a general manager with experience is you can't force decisions just because you have a need and just because a guy is there. Don't make something that it's not. Don't make the situation, make the scenario better because you have a need. You really have to stick with a plan. And I think that the Jets plan, to me, I think there's a chance where they're sitting in the first round. They could get two really good defensive players and build that defense. And I think they made a great move the other day as far as bringing Sweat in as a nose tackle because that's really Aaron Glenn, I think, is going to build the defense down the middle. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to Sonny Styles. But I just think you got to be really careful. If there's not another first-round quarterback, you just have to pass. And you can't go crazy in free agency for an older guy that's a 1 or 2 year solution, and you're eating salary cap money after that. So they have to have a plan. I'm sure they've talked at length about it, and I'm sure they have somebody targeted in free agency. But to me, I think Fernando Mendoza really is the only quarterback worthy of a first-round selection here.
Right. Well, that's fair. I mean, Marty, but when you look at this group on the whole and these quarterbacks that, some put on their athletic display, some were waiting for their pro day, but they were out there in Indianapolis. When you look at this group in terms of finding solutions, and there's different levels, right? Win with, win because of, right? But if you look at this group of quarterbacks, how many answers do you think there are potentially down the line? Do you think there are potentially 4 starting quarterbacks outside of Mendoza? Do you think it's 3 starting quarterbacks? Or do you think the majority of these quarterbacks that are coming into this NFL draft are mainly backups?
Yeah, I think the majority are probably backups, Mark. I would probably at 4, even at 3, I'd probably take the under as far as, other quarterbacks other than Mendoza in this draft coming out and being consistent starters. Listen, they all have skill sets and they're all very good players. But when you're talking about taking a quarterback in the first round, you know that he's going to be your future starter. Or you should. And I don't know whether teams can say that about those quarterbacks. Obviously, Ty Simpson's a guy that's probably got the best chance to sneak into the first, top of the second, if that happens. But I just think that, we've talked about, boy, if you need a quarterback, there's not a lot of places to find him right now.
All right, let's talk a little outside of quarterbacks. Let's stay on the offensive side of the ball. Jeremiyah Love, Marty, you and I both talked about him on Friday's edition of the GM Shuffle podcast, and he might be the cleanest overall prospect. What's your take on what he did out in Indianapolis, and how high can he go now after running a 4.36 40?
Shoot, our God said if he went second, Saquon Barkley went second, right? If he goes second, it's the team's really going to have to, break trend because our league doesn't take running backs that high. But I do think he is a legitimate game changer. I think he's on that same level as Bijan Robinson, who I think is exceptional. We saw. I always have had a higher opinion of the value of a running back. Even with the way offenses have changed, now you have to be able to catch the ball, and that's what's going to hurt Kenneth Walker a little bit, I think, in free agency. But you have to be able to be a dual threat running back. But if you are, I mean, I think that is one of the biggest weapons you can have on offense. The offensive line loves running the ball, and I think that it's a safety net for a young quarterback as far as outlets to running backs. I think he did everything that he could to if the Jets took him, or if somebody, the Jets obviously are keeping Breece Hall, but if he went second or third, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I think he's one of the impact players in this draft.
Marty, learning from guys like yourself that have done this job, right, and have run NFL teams, there's a difference between track speed and game speed, right? And they're not one and the same, right? So when you look at Carnell Tate, the wide receiver out of Ohio State, is it concerning for NFL teams that he only ran a 4.5 4.40?
Oh, they'll be talking about that that'll take about an hour, right? And usually those conversations that drive you crazy start right before lunch. So your stomach's growling and you have to listen for an hour about a guy running a 4.54. And I'm telling you, Mark, if I was in the room, I would just shout out Anquan Bolden and tell him the story that I told that in Carolina, where he went up and ran a 4.7. We had him in the first round, and he ran a 4.7, and we put him in the third. And of course, he went the first round and is a tremendous receiver. And listen, I think people that have teams ahead of them looking for receivers are just hoping that they pass on Carnell Tate because of a 4.54. That is not a concern to me. It is play speed, it's separation. Look at his frame and his production. I would not 4.54 is not a bad time. I think it's really, when you get to receivers, anything 4.6 and over, you start to really, that's a little bit of a red flag. I'm sure he's going to probably run again in his pro day, and I would think it would be better, but I would not let anything. I think he's the best receiver in the draft.
Marty, we talk about hand size when it comes to quarterback play. I'm curious, when you're looking at running backs or specifically wide receiver, any concern when you're looking at Makai Lemon, the wide out of USC, where his hands are under 9?
Very much so. And again, I mean, I think we were talking about this before, is I can't tell you how much time we spend on Brandon LaFell because he had 8 3/4 inch hands. And are they too small? And you go back into history, and, history will tell you that most receivers have 9.5 plus. That's the thing. Carnell Tate, 10-inch hands. I mean, you love that. But again, you have to go back to the tape, and it did not affect him. He was one of the guys I said Monday that I really like coming into this, and I still think he's probably the second receiver off the board, first round receiver. He's just too good. And when you look at tape, the hands are not an issue.
Marty, I want to ask you about a tight end, and who doesn't love Kenyon Siddiq, the tight end out of Oregon, right? And ran a 4.39 40. Vert was off the charts. Ran 11.1. Ran 11.1 broad. Had an 11.1 broad as well. What's your take on Kenyon Siddiq? I saw him in a couple of interviews with the media as well. Came across really, really well. Looks like he's basically cut from granite. How about the big tight end out of Oregon?
Yeah, I really like him. I think he's probably a top 10 pick, and you got to love Oregon tight ends. I mean, I love Terrence Ferguson with the Rams. I loved him. But the year before he came out, and I think that Oregon just seems to have a knack at that position. And this guy can do everything. He's athletic. He fits the mold of what you want. He can block, but he's a guy who can get downfield and really make key plays for you. And again, we talked about young quarterbacks and one of their best friends being a tight end. I think he did very well for himself at the combine, and I think he's going to be very happy on draft day.
Marty, quickly, can a guy like Casey Concepcion out of Texas A&M, who had a case of the dropsies in college, can he overcome that by having catching the ball really well, which he did this weekend out in Indy?
Yes, especially when you have somebody like myself who loved him coming into the combine. You love his quickness, you love his separation, you love his big play, his impactability. And I mean, listen, when you drop the ball, it's always going to be a concern. So does the way he caught the ball at the combine, it makes you feel a little better, but that's still there. So when you take him, that's going to be an issue, but he's got so many other that I really like. I really like him.
Straight ahead, right here on this edition of the GM Shuffle, we're going to get into the defensive players. Sonny Styles, the big linebacker out of Ohio State, well, he put on an absolute show. We'll do that next and hit upon Caleb Downs, his teammate, as well. That's next on the GM Shuffle, presented to you by the DraftKings Network.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome back to the GM Shuffle. Marc Malusis, Marty Hurney with you, post-NFL Scouting Combine. And Marty, we ran through some of the offensive players, quarterbacks, receivers, tight end, and obviously running backs. Let's focus in on the defensive players. If you like Sonny Styles before, Marty, I mean, you got to love Sonny Styles now. I mean, he is athletically freaky coming out of Ohio State, and we saw him star there for the Buckeyes. What about the show that Sonny did this past weekend for all NFL teams?
You know, Mark, I've been smiling because as an old school guy, I feel like some of the things are starting to that I've always believed in are starting to come back, circle around. You know, a running back was the MVP of the Super Bowl. Everybody knows how important I think they are. And then I always believed that a great defense starts with a very good, a Pro Bowl type middle linebacker. And over the years, that position has changed because they have to be able to cover sideline to sideline. You have to be able to cover backs. You have to be able to get downfield and cover a deep zone. And you have to be able to run and have range and still be physical enough to play the inside run and then be smart enough to align the defense. And if you can find a guy, those guys are hard to find. And that's why, we drafted Dan Morgan, we drafted John Beeson, we drafted Luke Kuechly, who's going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I really do think that's a key position that defenses have sort of gotten off of because it's hard to find a guy that is physical, smart, and fast. And that's what Sonny Styles is. And I think that, I'm even looking at the New York Jets. I know people would probably go crazy, but at 2, here they are. They went out and they traded for a defensive tackle in Sweat. And now if you would take Sonny Styles somewhere, and I'm not saying 2, but I think it's going to have to be probably somewhere in the top 10. But, if you took him, now you're building your defense down the middle, which is a formula that I've always believed in. So, Sonny Styles is an example of he's not a guy that just climbs up the board because of what he did at the combine. When you watch his tape, all his combine performance did was affirm what you saw on tape. So he really helped himself. I think that he's in a spot. He's in, to me, a difference-making position. To me, the middle linebacker on defense, it's an old school thought. But if you get a guy with a skill set that fits the modern day middle linebacker position, which Sonny Styles does, they are extremely hard to find. And I think it's really what you can build your defense around.
Marty, I want to ask you about Rueben Bain. He was a headline to a negative degree coming out of Indianapolis. So you watch his game tape down in Miami, remarkably productive, remarkable motor, and at times can be an absolute game wrecker. How much of a red flag is the fact that his arms measured out at 30 7/8?
It's a huge red flag, because you don't want, an defensive lineman cannot let an offensive lineman get his hands into your chest. And when you have short arms, it's harder to do that. Now, with that said, when we watch the tape of Rueben Bain and the first person and his arm length's going to come up in every draft room about 20 times, right? But my question would be, what happened between the season and the combine? Did his arms get shorter? So he obviously is a very good player, okay? And he can be a difference maker as a pass rusher, but the short arms are a real concern, and it definitely drops him. And, what I always say is you look at when you say, is a player going to drop? Well, you never know how far a player is going to drop. But if he has a major question, what usually happens is when you're on the clock, you usually have 2 or 3 players on the same line that you basically have in a stack of how you'll take them maybe 5 picks out. If you have 3 players, you put them up in order. Well, if it's close, if you have an issue like Rueben Bain does with short arms, you're probably going to lose most ties. So that's how you fall down the board. Is if a team really likes you, but has another player that they decide to go with, just because you're losing that close tie, you will drop some. And I think that Rueben Bain will probably drop a little bit because of the arm length. It's just, but he's a very talented, productive player, and those are the type of discussions in draft rooms that take a long time. That really everybody's got strong opinions, and you really have to work through that, because you do not want to throw him out just because of his arm length, but it does give you pause if you're really high, say in the top 5, and you're planning to take him. Now you have to go back and look at some other players. And I think there are a couple other guys, especially edge rushers, that would be taken before him.
Yeah, one of those guys. How about Texas Tech's David Bailey, Marty? From what we saw this weekend and what we saw from him athletically, do you think he has now solidified himself as a top 5 pick?
I do. I mean, gosh, Mark, what, 4'5", 40, and 10'9" broad, and
Yeah,
he's
crazy.
6'3.5". Now he's got 33 and 5-inch arms. Okay, so now this is what I mean is if you're comparing David Bailey and Rueben Bain, and you go through the measurables in the speed, and you're saying, okay, that we had them very closely graded on tape. Bailey's going to get the edge because of the speed, because of the measurables, and I think he solidified himself as a top 5 pick.
I want to ask you about Caleb Downs. We talked a little bit about him on Friday's edition of the GM Shuffle. Did not do the drills. He's waiting for his school pro day. What about that aspect of it, where there's some, NFL teams that look at it, we'll take on all challenges. Other guys want to put themselves more in a comfortable position. Any kind of knock on Caleb Downs, his decision not to partake this weekend down in Indy?
No, there's not. And, this thing is so cyclical. 15, 20 years ago, there were more guys who waited to go to their school because, it was, they knew the turf and they felt better about their chances of running better and working out better. But then when the event became so televised and so popular, it seemed like most guys were working out. Now it's starting to trend back a little bit, where the agents are saying, listen, to a guy like Caleb Downs, wait until you get home in Ohio State where you're comfortable and do everything. I mean, I don't think his workout or his drills are going to do anything to hurt his status. I think it will only help him. But I mean, he's a top player. So I just think that, some players are just going by their agents. I will tell you this. The one thing that drives me crazy about the combine is when a guy runs a fast 40 his first time, and then they show him on the bench, and the first thing he does is go to his cell phone because he's talking to his agent about whether he should run a second time or not. That just, listen, you always got to try to put aside the things that bug you a little bit over time, because it's really not a big deal. But you'd rather the guy sit there and just say, hey, I'm going to run another 40. I mean, I think I said the other day, Sam Cosmi at his pro day, I mean, he ran a 4.7 something 40 for an offensive tackle, and wanted to run again. And that really got me, that just impressed me. And we took him in the second round, and he's an incredible player. So, I think it doesn't hurt the guys that do not work out and work out their school, but it does help the guys that participate. I talked about how Cam Newton was one of the few top quarterbacks that threw in his class. And I think that just means something. It shows you that the guys are going to go out and compete no matter what.
If you like what you're hearing right here on the GM Shuffle, there's even more at VSiN Pro. Betting splits, power rankings, and sharp analysis, all for just $9.99 your first month. Go to vsin.com/subscribe and check out all the subscription options. Speaking of that, in terms of guys helping themselves out, let's go to one of Caleb Downs' teammates, Lorenzo Styles, right? How much did it help him, the fact that he flew in that 40-yard dash?
It helped him a lot. Now, this is an example, though, of the workout is a little bit better than the tape, right? So I don't know, did it move him up to day two? We'll see. But again, just like I said about Green, everybody's going to be running back to the tape and saying, did we miss this 4.27 or not? I mean, he flew, and I think it's probably surprised quite a few teams. So he's a good player. That definitely will help rise his stock. But again, people are going to go back to the tape and say, okay, do we see, does he play with that 4.27 speed?
Yeah, last one I want to ask you is about Jacob Rodriguez, the linebacker out of Texas Tech. He topped out at a tad over 18 miles an hour in the backpedal react drill. What's your take on Rodriguez, the prospect as a linebacker coming out of Texas Tech?
Yeah, and that 18.43 miles an hour, I think, is the fastest of any linebacker in Indy over the last 4 years or so. And I listen, Jacob Rodriguez, Kyle Lewis from Pittsburgh. If you can run and prove that you can be a cover backer and you can even, you can blitz from the edge, both those guys have really helped themselves. Lewis, I think, had a really good Senior Bowl week. I watched some coverage drills covering linebackers, and he's fluid. He can turn and run, and then Rodriguez's speed and fluidness. I mean, both those guys help themselves, and it will move up. Maybe to day two, but at least top of three.
How big of a combination is that, Marty, when you talk about like a guy like Lewis coming out of Pitt, where you're able to compound? You look at a really good Senior Bowl, and then you back up what you've seen on tape at Pitt with a really good Senior Bowl, and now a really good workout out in Indy.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you look, okay, how are we going to use him? That's the first question to the defensive coaches is, how would you use him? Is he a sub guy? He's probably, I mean, we're in a era where we, play six defensive backs a lot. So how are we going to use him? How does he fit? But his skill set certainly is right for the modern game, the way I say it.
Yeah, we have the franchise tag deadline coming up in a couple days. The NFL new league year is next week. We ran through some offensive needs for NFL teams on Friday's edition of the GM Shuffle. Straight ahead, we're going to pick Marty's brain. Gets NFL team needs when focused in on a couple teams defensively. We're going to do that next. That's next on the GM Shuffle, presented to you by the DraftKings Network.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome back to the GM Shuffle. Marc Malusis in for Jeff Schwartz, Marty Hurney, of course. And Jeff will be back with Marty on Monday for a little NFL free agency primer. New league year, Marty gets going. It's amazing. The National Football League is king. I mean, it basically every single month, every single week, there's something to pay attention to in the NFL, which is great, which is why we love it. We ran through the scouting combine, hit upon some players offensively and defensively. Marty, last week we did an exercise. I love doing this, especially with free agency almost upon us. When you're looking at team needs offensively, let's focus in on a couple of teams in terms of what they need defensively here moving forward. Let's start our journey down in Dallas with the Cowboys. Christian Parker taking over as defensive coordinator down in Dallas. Didn't work out for Matt Eberflus a year ago, and they're moving to a 3-4 defense. You see Jerry Jones saying, we're going to spend money in free agency. What about Dallas? What are they looking to try and do this offseason?
Well, I really would like to get a clear idea of what Christian Parker's going to do changing the defense, because, when you say 3-4, and I've had coaches tell me there's not a big difference between 3-4 and 4-3 these days because everybody's playing hybrid defenses, but it really was, it used to be, you would say the rule, if you're changing from a 4-3 to a 3-4, it really takes 2 to 3 years to get the right personnel transformation to play that that scheme. Now, I don't think that's necessarily the case in Dallas. I think that the way defenses are now, playing so many defensive backs, and everybody plays hybrid defenses. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But this is what they have to do, in my opinion, is do a very good job of the scouts, everybody sitting down with Christian Parker and saying, okay, what skill sets do you need at each position? What positions are the most important on your defense? And then go and rank the free agents and rank the defensive players. And it's really about who's going to be the best fit. I mean, they the biggest needs are corner and edge rusher probably for them. But I think that it's very important for the scouts and everybody to understand Christian Parker's mindset, because he will have different skill sets needed for different positions. And how much are you going to change this? Are you going to keep most of the 4-3 principles and just go hybrid and in certain situations? That'll depend, but it does take some time to change defensive schemes, especially from a 4-3 to a 3-4.
All right, want to ask you about the Commanders. Two things you don't want to be: old and slow. In the NFL, especially defensively. When you look at the Washington Commanders, Marty, we know Peters and company went all in this past season. Didn't work out. Daniels didn't stay healthy. What about on the defensive side of the ball? What does Washington hope to accomplish this offseason?
Yeah, I think that's where their attention probably will be. Maybe running back somewhere in free agency or the draft. But I think they've done a great job on their offensive line, and getting Laramie Tunsil done is critical, of course, and they know that. But you're right, Mark. I mean, on defense, I think they need edge rushers. They're solid inside, but linebacker, corner, they need more speed. They need youth and speed, and they were building their offense, and they did a great job of getting veteran pieces to put in their defense to be competitive. And really, I mean, the reason they weren't as competitive this year obviously was because of Jane Daniels' injury. But they do have to improve on defense if they want to be consistently competitive in that division, in that conference. And I think that I think the edge rushers and corner are probably their two biggest needs as well.
Marty, one thing Kyle Shanahan is doing. Yeah, and one thing Kyle Shanahan out in San Francisco is doing this offseason, praying for health in 2026, and especially on the defensive side of the ball. They've got a new DC, Saleh, obviously, now the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. They want Bosa, obviously, to return to form and return to health. Fred Warner, an unbelievable linebacker out there in San Francisco. What about the 49ers defensively this offseason? What are they looking to hope to accomplish? Their secondary struggled in coverage a year ago.
Yeah, you know what, Mark? There's pluses and minuses to having the kind of injury riddled season that the 49ers had. Is number one, the positive is that you had a lot of young players get a lot of play time because guys got hurt, right? So they should be that much better coming forward. But obviously, on defense, I think their defensive line and their pass rush is still number one. Middle linebacker would be another need. But they just need to. They should be better this year just because of the experience that so many players got, because they had so many injuries. So listen, what they did coaching wise this year, we said was incredible. And I think that right now, they probably say number one, we got to make sure we get another edge rusher. And then if they could get a linebacker like a Sonny Styles or somebody that could be in the middle with Warner getting older, linebacker would be a need too. But I would say defense line would be their biggest need.
Marty, let's jump over to the AFC. How about the Cincinnati Bengals? Joe Burrow and company. We know they could throw it. Burrow, obviously, when healthy, is a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League. Has got weapons on offense. Defense has been an issue and has been for the last couple of years. What about defensively when you're looking at the Cincinnati Bengals this offseason, what they're looking to try and do?
Well, and it starts with, what's going to happen to Trey Hendrickson, right? I mean, I can't see them letting him go, but if they do, but they need pass rush. they need basically anything you want to give them on defense. I think that it should be basically a defensive-oriented draft for them. And, because really, other than maybe another offensive lineman, they're okay on the other side of the ball. So I think that, defense starting with the pass rush, but anywhere on defense, they just need to get as many good defensive players as they can.
Down to Tennessee, Robert Saleh takes over as head coach with the Titans. We know he's a really good defensive coordinator. They've already made one move, adding Jermaine Johnson from the New York Jets in that deal for the big defensive tackle. And Sweatin's going to Florham Park and playing for Gang Green moving forward. What about the Titans this offseason? Offensively, you've got Dable and you've got Cam Ward going into year 2, the former first overall draft choice. What about Tennessee this offseason, now led by their new head coach, Robert Saleh?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the first thing you want to do is make sure you protect your young quarterback, right? And a wide receiver is a need. They have weapons, but they need weapons. But on defense, they edge rusher was a number one need, and they've got Jeffrey Simmons inside. He had 11 sacks last year. The next guy had 5. So now you bring in Jermaine Johnson on the outside. That's going to help that and should increase that number. So I think that's a good start. I mean, Titans are off to a very good start as far as with that trade for Jermaine Johnson. But I think cornerback and edge rushers are probably their 2 biggest needs on defense. But I also do think they need wide receivers as well.
Marty, when you're an executive running a team, I'll bring up the Kansas City Chiefs, right? And you were running how difficult is to let emotion not come into play when you're looking at a player for what he is now as compared to what he has provided that organization? I bring the Chiefs into a kind of because there's a belief that Kansas City needs a little bit of a turnover, that maybe their roster has gotten a little bit old in spots, especially on the defensive side of the ball. How difficult is that for an executive when you don't let the emotions, the player, the relationship, what a player is meant for an organization and where they're at this stage of their career?
I think it's the number one thing you have to learn as a general manager, Mark. And some of the biggest mistakes I made were probably because I put emotion into it. And it is very hard to step back and make decisions on guys that, have been with you for 6, 8, 10 years and giving you everything they've got. It's hard to make changes like that, but you have to, because it's if you don't do that, Jerry Richardson always said, are you going to protect one guy and put 300 people that work in this organization at risk? I mean, it's you have to do what's best for the organization. So it's hard sometimes. You have to push those emotions aside, but you really do have to really accurately look and evaluate your roster and your team needs. And I think that's something that Kansas City has done extremely well over the years under Andy Reid. And I think they'll continue to do this. And listen, the Chiefs don't like the feeling they have right now. I mean, they weren't used to sitting and watching the playoffs on TV. So I think they're very motivated. I think they're going to be very disciplined in their approach as far as evaluating their own team and really be honest about where they may need to move forward for. But they're going to get a really good player in the draft. And I think that, I know it's gloom and doom right now, but the Chiefs are not far away from being able to come back and make a run at the Super Bowl next year.
Well, one team that is the New York Jets, Marty, and I got to ask you about that. I don't know if I need Aaron Glenn telling me that calling plays is his superpower as now the head coach. I mean, that might come back to haunt him at some point in time in 26, but we'll see. But, Marty, what about defensively here now with AG taking over as the defensive play caller? We've already seen one move. What are some new needs for the New York Jets defensively this offseason?
Well, we've talked about Sonny Styles. We talked about in the middle and building it up. I think, obviously corner is a need now with Sauce Gardner traded and corner is a need. But I would love to see them, the thing that would get me excited about Sonny Styles is, other than the player, is the thinking and the blueprint in the formula that they would use to build their defense. That's why I love that move last week, because Aaron Glenn says, listen, starting inside in the middle, stopping the run is very important. And then a natural follow-up to that would be to get a middle linebacker like a Sonny Styles. So it's going to be interesting to see how they connect the dots to me. But they obviously need defensive help in a lot of areas. But it's really, what do you think? What do you want your offense to be? What do you want it to look like? And that's what's going to be interesting to me, which direction they go and what players they use with those first 2 picks, unless they trade one of them. It's how they connect the dots on their defense.
Marty, this has been an absolute blast filling in for Jeff the past couple episodes of the GM Shuffle. Jeff will be back with Marty on Monday for the NFL free agency primer. But Marty, a pleasure as always. Great job.
Been fun, Mark. Thanks so much. It's been a blast.
You got it. The GM Shuffle drops every Monday on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Join our community and post your comments and questions. This has been the GM Shuffle, presented to you by the DraftKings Network.